So this story is actually pretty simple. One day, the world takes a nap. But our protagonist, Yasin, doesn't take the memo. And so, he spends the next few days exploring this very empty world until, eventually, the world wakes up. And there are a lot of takeaways from this story. Some good, some bad. And by the way, if you want to support me and be notified about new releases before anyone else, you can go follow me on social media. You don't need to pay anything, but it does help me out a lot. So thank you guys so much. First of all, I think the author does a really good job setting the scene. This is really important because in the beginning, the whole story is just Yasin walking around an empty city. So we as readers really need to connect with the surroundings. And I think they do a good job because the story starts off with a very interesting hook. There's something definitely off. He notices a bird froze in the air. A man is paused mid-scroll, qualmed, and this immediately grabs your attention. But what really makes the story come alive is how Yasin perceives these things. For example, he sees the man scrolling his phone and thinks, maybe he's looking at a picture of his family or something. He thinks about the bird. It probably just got caught in the wind. And even when he hears a voice in his head telling him to run away, he thinks it might be an audiobook. Basically, he is trying to rationalize everything, and that really helps us believe that this is happening to someone normal, which makes the situation far more relatable. The second chapter begins with a cool concept. Essentially, Yasin goes home, but nobody reacts to him, like he's completely invisible. But I don't think the author capitalized on this enough. Imagine if Yasin tried to interact with his parents, tried to talk to them, but they just kind of looked right through him. That would have been a really powerful moment. Chapter 3 introduces Mira, another character who is also awake. Honestly, I do think this is the best executed part in the story because the dialogue is really stiff. We get lines like, "I thought I was alone," Yasin said. "Me too," Mira replied, "until I wasn't." And it just comes off a bit forced. However, the author does introduce a nice element. Essentially, the two characters started to notice that although time seems to have stopped, it isn't completely frozen. Things start to slowly move. The river stops being still. The bubble pops. And I like this idea. It reminds me of those cartoons where the background is moving, but the foreground is completely still. In Chapter 4, the tone shifts and the atmosphere changes from fun and lighthearted to lonely and depressing. The fact that they're jumping fences, exploring rooftops, helping themselves to snacks, taking things without asking, it shows that they're not really thinking about the consequences. It's like they're just children again. And this is effective because it conveys the message that this silence, this stillness is suffocating. They're starting to get bored and frustrated. Mira says, this isn't just stillness, it's waiting. And I think that was the purpose of this section. The author wanted to convey that. Yeah, being stuck in this place forever might not be a big deal at first, but eventually it becomes a huge problem. Chapter 5 is where the plot really moves forward. The discovery of the wishing tree introduces a sense of hope. And this is when the story starts feeling a bit more fantastical. Because, although this is a modern story, there's clear influence from fairy tales. The magical realism elements increase the emotional impact of the story, because it blurs the line between reality and fantasy. Chapter 6 is probably my favorite part in the story, because it marks a turning point. Yasin and Mira stop wasting time and instead start helping others. I think this decision adds a layer of maturity to the characters. It shows growth. They realize they have the ability to make a difference, and they choose to do so. Chapter 7 is when the story reaches its climax. The return of movement symbolizes the awakening of the world. Again, this connects to the fairy tale vibes, and I really like this line. Mira smiled. We're waking something up. It's simple, but it packs a punch. It shows that the characters are making a real difference. Chapter 8 is a bit confusing to me because the ending of the story happens abruptly, and it feels like it's missing a part. For example, why did they decide to fix things? Was it just because they wanted to? Or was there a deeper reason? How did they feel when they realized that people were frozen? And why did they go to the tree every night? Like, these questions aren't necessarily essential to the plot, but they would have made the story feel more complete. I think the author could have fleshed out the middle of the story more and added some scenes where Yasin and Mira bond over their experiences. That would have made their relationship feel more believable and given us insight into how this experience affected them emotionally. Also, they just kind of randomly decided to help people, and I think it would have been better if there was some kind of build-up to that. Maybe they could have tried to do something else first, but failed, and then decided to try something else. I don't know. I'm not great at writing stories, but I just think that adding more detail in certain parts would have made the story flow better. For example, we know that the reason time stopped is because the world was rushing too much. It was forgetting small things. But we don't really see evidence of that. We don't see people arguing, speeding through life. So it just kind of feels random. I think the story would have benefited from more sensory details. You know, the smell of exhaust in the air, the sound of construction. Because these things are things we tend to tune out when we're in that rushing mode. So by highlighting them, the story would have become more immersive and the message would have resonated more. Still, it's a really good story, and it has a lot of potential. In a weird way, it reminds me of The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Both stories are about finding meaning and appreciating life. But they do so by using very different methods. Overall, I give this story an 8 out of 10. If you read any other stories by this author, let me know in the comments because I'd love to check them out. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to leave a like. It's free and it helps a lot. Bye bye.